All right, we just got more buffs and more nerfs to a variety of different classes. We got some boomkin changes, some warrior changes, some rogue changes, mage changes. It's all over the place during heroic week. So I want to go through that WoWHead article and check out everything that's been changed in the most recent class tuning. So we got Death Knight, Sand Lane, Vampiric Strike, chance to crit trigger increased to 25%, was 10%. Frenzied Bloodthirst damage of Death Coil and Death Strike increased by 5% per stack, was 4%. That's pretty good. Sand Lane Visceral Strength grants 8% strength, was 6. So just buffs to Sand Lane. Vampiric Strike damage increased by 20%. Infliction of Sorrow deals 15% of the remaining damage over time, was 10%. So just flat out buffs to Sand Lane. That's pretty solid. Let's see. Havoc. Fixed an issue, okay. Druid, balance damage. Balance got all ability damage increased by 6%. Star Surge damage increased by 16%. Starfall damage increased by 20%. And Alun's Chosen, Lunar Calling increases Starfire damage to its primary target by 80%, was 65. So big buffs for Balance Druid. Feral, no longer increased the damage of Rampant Ferocity. All ability damage increased by 3%. Rip damage increased by 6%. Ferocious Bite damage increased by 3%. Feral Frenzy increased by 10%. And Ravage damage increased by 3%. So Feral got buffs across the board. Restoration. All healing increased by 8%. Wrath damage increased by 20%. Starfire damage increased by 20%. Star Search damage increased by 20%. I don't think damage was the Resto Druid's issue. I think it was healing. I think they need some more healing. I mean, 8% solid, but we'll see if that actually does it. Evoker, Disintegrate damage increased by 10%. Just a nice buff. Eternity Surge damage increased by 10%. So we're sending a lot of buffs out right now. We had one nerf, I think it was. No, I don't think we've actually had a nerf yet. Okay, so we got a lot of buffs. We got Mage, Living Bombs, Explosion Visual now only plays on the unit that has Living Bomb rather than each unit damaged by explosion. That's probably good for just clutter. Meteorite damage reduced by 15%. There's our nerf. Burden of Power damage reduced to 20%, was 30%. So okay, so Arcane's getting some nerfs. That was probably expected. They were kind of pumping. Fire getting a buff. Again, probably kind of expected. Windwalker. Darting Hurricanes passive trigger rate was reduced by 50% and now reduces the global cooldown by 0.25. Some healing increase and some damage increase for Mistweaver. Dawnlight damage reduced by 15%. Nerf to Ret Pallies. All damage increased by 6%. Shadow's getting a buff. Psychic Link now inflicts 25% of its direct damage instead of 30. Okay, so it's a little nerf to AoE, but I think it probably balances pretty closely. What? Outlaw, all ability damage reduced by 4%, dispatch damage reduced by 10%, melee auto attack damage reduced by 8%. Well, rest in peace to Outlaw, man. I was so excited for it. Dude, how are they? I didn't think Outlaw was doing even that good. And we just got a 8% melee auto, 8% auto attack nerf. Yeah, they nerfed Outlaw. Which I don't think deserved it. Somehow Assassination's still floating by. I think it's just because Assassination or Outlaw was doing very, very good in the raid, and I think they're basing it off of that. So we'll see if it's still good. Set bonus now grants listed abilities a 35% chance. Deal 30% increased damage as Shadow, was 20% and 15 damage. So our tier set bonus got up, but our tier set was dog water anyways. It was like a 0.7% damage increase or something. It was bad. War Within set bonus between the eyes increased to 15% damage per stack up to 4 stacks, was 6 and 3. So we're getting some nerfs, but our set bonus might actually fucking slap now with between the eyes getting a 60% damage increase instead of a 18% damage increase. That's pretty huge. But we'll see. I mean, that kind of sucks to see the nerfs when I didn't think Outlaw was even at that level to get nerfs. But we'll see. Enhancement Shaman, all ability damage increased by 4%. Witch Doctor's Ancestry now reduces the cooldown of Feral Spirit by 1 second whenever you gain a Maelstrom. Weapon stack was 2 seconds. Okay, you get stacks so fast that I think it's just going to reduce anyways. War Within increases the damage of Storm Strike, Lava Lash, Ice Strike, and Crash Lightning by 10% was 6. So they're buffing the tier sets. Tier sets are really bad. So Restoration. So it looks like all the healers are getting some damage increases. Like Mistweaver got damage increases. Feral got, Resto Druids got damage increases. So they want healers to do damage apparently. Now we got Warlock. Demonology. Demon Bolt damage increased by 20%. Pact of the Arid Ruin, Summon Doomguard damage increased by 45%. Felguard damage increased by 15%. Good for Demonology. Destruction, all ability damage increased by 6%. Dimensional Rift damage increased by 40%. Channel Deem Fire, okay. These are weird buffs. I haven't really been following like too closely on the heroic runs, but these some of them feel out of place. I feel like Locke wasn't doing bad. All right, Warrior, Colossus, Mountain of Muscle and Scars, increased damage dealt by 5% was 4. Damage dealt by demolishes 2 initial strikes, increased by 20%. That's pretty hefty. Mountain Thane, Thunder Blast, Lightning Strikes, and Ground Current damage increased by 6%. Nice. Blade Storm damage reduced by 10%. Blade Storm damage reduced by 10%. Odin Fury's damage reduced by 15%. Okay, so nerfs to DPS Warrior, buffs to Prot Warrior and damage. And then PvP is not I. So mostly buffs, nerfs to couple classes. A couple classes I'm surprised about. But Prickle, they buff Sand Lane, or it's gonna be tomorrow at least, or not tomorrow, 17th. Sand Lane's getting some hefty buffs, so that's good. If you've been playing Sand Lane, maybe ride it out. Don't even try Deathbringer yet. See if this ends up being the play. I mean, getting a 15% increase for Vampiric Strike to trigger is pretty huge. Strength increase, 20% damage increase. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, definitely hang on to that. See if you like it when that drops, rather than learn Deathbringer just to have to go back to Sand Lane.